Good afternoon, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
My name is Fawzia Khan. I'm the president of the American Muslim Women Association, and I want to welcome everyone. Today's summer luncheon virtual program topic is what are the root causes of arrogance beginning in the Garden of Eden? Perspective from Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Our speakers are Rabbi Maya Young, Minister Dr. Karen Black, and Dr. Majideen Hassan. Let's start our program with the opening prayer. Al-Fatiha, the opening. I will read it in Arabic. You can please read it in the English translation and the meaning. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. There are some new members that I see that have registered and that are on the program today. So just a little bit about AMWA. As the president, it's my job to let everyone know what AMWA does and what AMWA is. So a little bit about AMWA. AMWA was formed after 9/11, and it was formed to help our community know what the true religion of Islam is, and not what the media was portraying at the time. So AMWA's mission is to share information about Islam, increase the community awareness regarding our faith by organizing various educational, social, intellectual forums. AMWA is committed to provide self-empowerment awareness programs to enhance the quality of life and domestic harmony in our community. Inspired to build bridges among our interfaith communities. You can visit us at www.amwa.us. You can always, if you have a question and a concern, you can email us at mail@amwa.us. And AMWA is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, so all donations made to AMWA are tax deductible. Here are some board members. Dr. Majideen Hassan is AMWA's chairperson. That's me after her. Shaida Qadir is AMWA's secretary. Omema Abu Saw is the treasurer. Sakina Mujahideen Alfiya Collins is the communication officer. Nasreen Hussain, Fawzia Qureshi, and Shaheen Sheikh are all public relation officers. Zina Magdadi is our AMWA's past president, and she's also a part of the advisory board. So summer interfaith luncheon. This year, 2021, is a special year for AMWA. It's a milestone for our 20th anniversary. I don't know how many of you believe it, but we've been around for 20 years. And that's why you were looking at the flyers in the beginning of the program, that I picked out some of the past luncheon flyers so you can see what the other topics were. And here I wrote down some of the topics on the next two slides. And the reason the summer luncheon was created, it was created for community members who are unable to come out during the evening. In the beginning, AMWA's program was basically in the evening program. So we wanted to have community members come out during the day also. And there were requests that, they can't come out in the evening, let's do an afternoon program. So we started the summer luncheon with, and our first summer luncheon program was consisted of a lecture and a book signing. And it was the Faith Club, a Muslim, a Christian, a Jew, 3 women search of understanding. So that program was a hit, and that led AMWA to think about AMWA's future programs for the summer luncheon, thinking that getting topics and talking about them from the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran to help us to learn about our teaching and to also help others about their teaching, learn about others' teaching. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but I just want to stop at number 11, which is the 2017 program. 2017, we changed the menu from the YWCA to Memorial United Methodist Church. And that year we had, the topic was Love Thy Neighbor, Which Neighbor Must I Love? And it was such an appropriate topic. It just came out that we were doing it at a memorial, and Memorial holds a special place for AMWA because of Reverend Joe Agnew. Reverend Joe Agnew was the first AMWA supporter and the first person who believed in AMWA, and not only believed in AMWA, but introduced AMWA to all the interfaith community organizations in Westchester County. So there's a special part for Memorial and Reverend Joe Agnew. So these are the speakers that we had in the past during the summer luncheon, and we are AMWA is grateful to all the speakers in the past for their viewpoint, and their viewpoint opened up our hearts and our minds. And some pictures down memory lane. I just want you to see if you see yourself there, or maybe a friend. Oops. I'm sorry, this technology is not my first language. So back to the pictures. So we're hoping in 2022 that we will be able to see some, get back, inshallah, to this lunch line, and hopefully see some of you in this serving lunch here. Some virtual rules for this program today. Please keep your mic on mute unless the speakers are speaking. And if you have any questions, please put it down in the chat box. And if you have a question directed to a particular speaker, please put their name in for their answer. You will also be getting an email for your feedback for today's program and for future programs. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Majideen to start the program. Dr. Majideen Hassan is the chairperson of AMWA and the co-founder of the American Muslim Women Association and the Center for Jewish Christian Muslim Understanding. Born in Pakistan, she studied medicine in New York as a plastic reconstructive surgeon. Dr. Hassan practices in Sleepy Hollow and Felt Memorial Hospital. After performing her Hajj, her love for understanding of the Arabic language grew. She volunteers several times a week to teach Arabic and understanding of the Quran in the local Muslim community. Her interest in interfaith grew after 9/11, so she felt the need to explain the true teachings of Islam. She has received several honors and awards. Itzai Rabin Peacemaker Award presented by the Coalition of Mutual Respect in 2003. Ittihad Award presented by the Westchester Muslim Community in 2004. Recipient of the Ambassador of Peace Award in 2009. Dr. Majleen, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can share yours. You want to introduce the speaker before you share your screen, Majleen, because you're going to be afterwards, because if you share your screen, then we'll be on all the time.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing the screen.
Okay.
All right. So shalom and peace and salam alaikum to all. It is a great pleasure and honor for me to introduce the first speaker of this luncheon. First of all, I want to welcome Rabbi Mara. This is her first time she's going to be our speaker, and we are looking forward to learning from her. Rabbi is at Woodlands Community Temple in Greenberg. She was ordained at the Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion, where she also earned a Master's of Hebrew Literature and a certificate in education. She specializes in adolescents and emerging adults. She grew up in Westfield, New Jersey, not too far from here, and attended the Tufts University in Boston. She and her husband have 2 kids, ages 8 and 5, and they have recently adopted a dog. Now it feels like 3. So with that, I invite Rabbi Mara to teach us, and we would like to learn from her about this topic about arrogance.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Hassan and Dr. Blacks. I'm just honored to be on this panel with you folks and to be a part of this really beautiful community that we are enjoying at this lunch hour on this Wednesday. I've been to the luncheon before, and I just welcome any moment where we can bring all of our different faith communities together. And I'm just so happy to be here, even in this virtual space, with hopes that we'll be together physically in the future. So when Dr. Hassan approached me about talking about arrogance within the Jewish tradition, specifically where it's connected to the story of the Garden of Eden, it's a very complicated answer within Judaism, which, I mean, most things within Jewish thought get complicated at some point, because I think the understanding that we have of the Garden of Eden sort of out in the world is different than how Judaism tends to talk about what happened there. And what I mean about that is, if we're going to see the Garden of Eden as a utopia and humanity being cast out of the Garden of Eden as a punishment, as a fall, if you were, then there's this assumption perhaps that we were always supposed to be there. But when you start to dig into Jewish texts, our tradition seems to come to this place of, well, we weren't actually supposed to stay in the Garden of Eden forever. And when we use that as the underlying assumption, then we start to say, okay, what does that mean about human nature and the certain ways in which we treat one another and the ways we treat ourselves. So I'm going to hopefully start to piece through all of that. I want to start by talking about the word arrogance in Judaism. In Hebrew, there's a bunch of different words that seem to describe the feeling or the way of being arrogant. What they all have in common is that arrogance in Judaism seems to be about lifting your ego up to a place where it does not belong. So one of the words is lehitnaseh, which actually was recently used in the Torah portion that we read weekly. There's this rebellion that happens when the Jews are wandering in the desert, and a man named Korach steps up and says to Moses and Aaron, says, "Who made you the rulers? Who told you to place yourselves above everybody else?" Well, the answer is actually God. So there's a quite simple answer to it. But the word that he uses is lehitnaseh, which isn't just, who appointed you the president, who said you could be the head of the club. It's really, how dare you raise yourselves up to lord over everybody else? And depending on the translation, you're going to get something like he's making an accusation of arrogance, of placing yourself before others. There's also the Hebrew word gova, which has its roots in the word in the heights right? So again, this idea of lifting up, and that seems to be connected to haughtiness. And there's also yehirut, which comes from a root that means to exceed one's limits. So you can see how this is about a lifting up to a place where you don't belong, transgressing a proper boundary with your ego that you have no place crossing into. We see this in the Proverbs and in the Psalms and in a lot of rabbinic wisdom. There's a real problem within Jewish thought with this elevation of the ego because it leads to communal discord. And if we place ourselves above others and make a habit of doing so, just even internally, just even having the attitude, that arrogant attitude, you're going to create rifts within society. And Jewish thought is very concerned with keeping the social fabric intact and helping people to interact with each other in a righteous way. And then there's also just the idea of personal baseness, of giving in to your lesser inclinations. And there's a warning to always be on the lookout for your yetzer hara, your evil inclination, those kind of baser parts of being human that we don't want them to run amok. Now, what I think is interesting is that within Jewish thought, we're never supposed to get rid of those emotions and feelings and tendencies that make us human. There's no assumption or even desire that we will erase arrogance from our lives because we are human beings. And to erase those baser inclinations would actually mean that we would be something that we were never created to be. And I'm going to get more into that a little bit later. There's a spiritual practice in Judaism called musar, and it's a way to cultivate better inclinations within oneself, and not to perfect yourself, but to kind of get yourself going in the right direction and to be doing the constant hard work of taking your yetzer hara, taking those baser inclinations and perhaps minimizing them, or better yet, making room for the better inclinations that we have, the yetzer hatov, those things that make us more in the image of God. So rather than talking about getting rid of arrogance in Judaism, we talk more about cultivating humility. Now, the logic of it plays out that if you cultivate humility, you will minimize arrogance, but it's a different way in to the spiritual practice by saying arrogance is always going to be there. And that sense of ego is always going to be there, but we can work on our humility muscle, so to speak, and try to exercise it a little bit more. But musar and this exercising of our better inclinations still accepts the human condition, that we are capable of good and we are capable of bad. And there's no real judgment on this. It's really about finding balance in our lives, because we're not actually supposed to be completely humble. People need arrogance in their lives. It does have some place in our functioning because it helps us to accomplish things. It helps us to maybe live up to our full potential in terms of our careers, in terms of just kind of, you need self-esteem, some healthy self-esteem in order to accomplish things in life. There's a powerful voice within the Musar movement, man Alan Marinas, who puts it this way. He says, "No more than my place, no less than my space. No more than my place, no less than my space." So you don't want to take up more room. And that goes back to the Hebrew, right? You shouldn't lift yourself up. You shouldn't transgress certain boundaries just to make yourself kind of feel good and get your name out there. But you also have been given some space on this planet, and you should own that space. You should feel confident within it. So the question we're constantly asking ourselves is, how much room should we take up? Because we are meant to take up some room. And there's another popular rabbinic teaching that a person should have two pieces of paper in their pockets, one piece of paper in one pocket, one piece of paper in another pocket. One piece of paper should say, "For my sake, the world was created." It's a really affirming statement. For my sake, the world was created. And the other piece of paper should say, "I am but dust and ashes." Because the world wasn't only created for your sake, it was created for the sake of all of humanity and all of the creatures on this planet. And it was created because of the divine will. So we have to be able to see ourselves within that and understand that we are but dust and ashes. And the dust and ashes is what's going to take us to the Garden of Eden. So Jewish tradition is constantly telling us that on the one hand, we are godlike. We are created B'Tselem Elohim. In the book of Genesis, we are created B'Tselem Elohim, in God's image. So there is something very divine about every human being, but we also understand that we are messily human. Therefore, we're more prone to giving into our baser instincts than God would be, for example. So the Garden of Eden and the nature of humankind. I'm going to share a story that I think is really helpful. The Talmud, which is a collection of rabbinic wisdom, tells a midrash. A midrash is a story that is meant to investigate deeper into the meaning of Torah. So this comes out of Tractate Sanhedrin. It's one of the volumes. When the Holy One, blessed be God, came to create humanity, God created a group of ministering angels and asked the angels, "Do you think we should make humanity in our image?" And the angels said, "Well, God, what are they going to do if you create these human beings? What's their future going to look like?" So God showed them everything that would happen in humanity's future. And the angels took one look at it and said, "You don't want to create these people. All they do are these terrible things. They mess up your creation. Do not create humanity." And God goes and destroys that group of angels. So then God creates a second group of angels, and God asks them the same question, and they have the same answer. "Wow, if that's what these people are going to do, I wouldn't create them, God." And God destroys that group of angels. So then God creates a third group of angels. And when God says, "Should I create humanity?" the angels say this time, "Sovereign of the universe, the first and second group of angels told you not to create humanity, but you didn't like that answer. So we're going to say this: the universe is yours. Do with it as you wish." And so then God goes forward and creates humanity. And then the Midrash goes, when it came to the generation of the flood, Noah and the ark and the big flood, and the people who built the Tower of Babel, the angels, this third group of angels, turn to God and say, "Weren't the first angels right? I mean, look how terrible these humans are that you created." And God replies, quoting actually the book of Isaiah, "Even to old age, I will not change. Even to gray hair, I will still be patient." So the Midrash is saying that even though God knows that we are capable of all of these terrible things, the way that we treat creation, the way that we treat each other, emotions and feelings like arrogance, why would God still want us to exist out in the world, even with our Yetzer Hara, even with all of our evil inclinations? And I think one of the lessons that comes out of this story is that God understands this kind of natural makeup of humans and the fact that we are of creation and we aspire to be better. We aspire towards God because we are B'Tselem Elohim. We want to be godlike, and we never will be. And that's the lesson of the Garden of Eden, because the Garden of Eden story is full of all kinds of strange paradoxes where we kind of start to ask ourselves, were we ever really meant to be in that paradise, to be these perfect non-arrogant creatures, or were we always meant to go out into the world and live these complicated, messy lives? The bottom line of it is how humans are created. So God, Genesis chapter 2 and Genesis chapter 3 are basically obsessed with the word Adamah. And the word Adamah means earth, like the ground. And Adam, the first human, comes from the word Adamah. The Hebrew is linked. The first human is made of dust. So our mortality is emphasized in being told that from dust we came and to dust we will return, right? That's one of the punishments of eating of the fruit in the Garden of Eden, is that we are going to have dust be our end. We're going to be these mortal beings that go back to the earth. So lest you raise yourself above another human, lest you raise yourself above God, remember that you came from a low, humble place, the dust of the earth. But the first human is created from the dust of the earth. How does that dust come to life? God breathes God's essence into that dust. And that is how the first human comes to life. So we are different, and this is what I'm going to close with. We are different from the animals in that we have the Spirit of God within us, sustaining us. Our own breath is of God. But lest we think that is something that makes us so self-important, we also are told in Genesis that we were created from dust. So the Jewish perspective is all about this balance. And if I get a chance a little bit later, I'll talk about the fall, and maybe we'll see where perhaps God always intended for us to leave the Garden of Eden, to go out and struggle with our arrogance. But that was always what God wanted for us. Thanks.
That was great, Rabbi. Wonderful. Hopefully, we are going to be listening soon to Reverend Pastor Karen Blacks and listen to her version of arrogance in the scriptures. So with that, may I introduce Pastor Karen M. Blacks, and she's known as really Dr. K. And she is from Baltimore, Maryland's native. She has a ministry in a modern context which demands two things, according to her. One is methodology that embraces both the local and the global community. And the other is the blending of traditional and contemporary mechanisms to spread the gospel of Prophet Jesus. Her background is in communications with an entrepreneurial spirit. She's also the founder of Women of God in the World, which is an offline program. She serves as a consultant to ministries in the tri-state area. She has Master of Divinity and Doctor of Ministry from New York Theological Seminary. She has attended Harvard School of Business online and has earned her certificate in the leadership and management. With that, I bring to you Associate Minister at Antioch in Bedford, Reverend Blacks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me again this year, Dr. Hassan and my sisters and friends. And I just thank everybody who's gathered here today. Rabbi Mara, that was amazing. So thank you. I was listening and I forgot that I had to talk. I was just drawn into what you were saying. And so thank you for making it easy for me. So I would like to keep my talk short. I'm going to get a text message, and we're talking about what are the root causes of arrogance beginning in the Garden of Eden. I'm going to start off with a definition of arrogance. Merriam-Webster's dictionary tells us that arrogance is exaggerating or likely to exaggerate one's own worth or importance, often in an overbearing manner. We don't know any people like that. And it's also showing an offensive attitude of superiority. And I'm going to come back to that, an offensive attitude of superiority. So other words that describe arrogance: chesty, haughty, highfalutin, and that is a word, high-handed, you're huffy or pompous, pretentious or presumptuous. Jesus said stiff-necked, superior, and finally uppity. All of those are other words that describe how it is to be arrogant. So to get to the question of the day, what are some of the root causes? We'll start, as our subject demands, that we start in the Garden of Eden, as it is accounted in the book of Genesis. Thank you again, Rabbi. And Genesis, it actually means it is the origin, it's the formation in the Bible and some of our other sacred texts. It contains the account of the beginning of all things. We're familiar with the language: in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, the day and the night. He separated the water from the sky and the land. He created vegetation, plants, sun, moon, fish, and animals. What I like about this, and what I would like for us to hold on to, is everything God created, God declared it as good. In Genesis chapter 1:31, he says, and God looked at what God had made and he said it was all good. And so the garden, God had also created a place in Eden, and a garden in a place called Eden. The Bible goes into great detail about where this garden is located, but I've only got 20 minutes, so we're just going to say it's located in Eden. And this garden had everything in it that humankind, man or woman, would need to live. There was one stipulation: do not eat from the tree in the center of the garden. You're free to eat from any tree in the garden, the Bible says, but you must not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. For when you eat from it, you will certainly die. Otherwise, you've got the garden. I've given you everything. It's beautiful, it's lush. God made it good, and it is for humanity to dwell and live in. It goes on, the passage goes on. Woman is created, God's best creation. That's my input. That's not in the Bible. That's just what I say. And again, it's all good as God has created it. They're living free. Everything is going on. It tells us that they're doing well, because it says they were both naked and they felt no shame. So in this wonderful place, God had created them. They were innocent, they were free, and they were living in everything was good. Enter chapter 3. Thank you again, Rabbi Mara. The fall, or as I will call it for today, the root of arrogance. This is not a scholarly point of view. This is as a result of my own study. So the serpent questions the woman about the tree. He asked, did God say you really can't eat from this tree? And she responds appropriately. Yes, God said we could eat from anywhere in the garden, but we can't eat from this tree. We'll surely die. And then the serpent, here comes the roots of arrogance. He said, did God really say you die? You won't die. What's going to happen is your eyes will be opened and you will be like God. So here comes the temptation, or the choice, or the option. The seed is planted that she can be like God. And her response, it says, when the woman saw that the fruit from the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took it and she ate it. Here we go again with the root causes of arrogance. In my speak today will be the desire to be like God, as we find in that passage. Desiring to have the knowledge of good and evil. Being that the garden was good, they had no concept of evil. The passage tells us that they were naked and they didn't know it. They had no shame. They were living free. They had no concept of good or evil. However, after eating what was forbidden, they were aware of their nakedness. That is evidence of an awareness that was not present before. Desiring to be like God, the root of arrogance. We cannot be like God. One of my favorite theologians, Thomas Aquinas, says, in our limited capacity, as humans, we are unable to conceive of God fully because God is beyond our comprehension. If we were able to understand and explain God, then God would not be God. God is immeasurable and incomprehensible. The desire to be like God, in my view, is the epitome of arrogance. It is an offensive attitude of superiority to assume that we are even remotely capable of being like God, if we stick to the passage that we're assigned to today. So I ask the question, so what does this look like? What is our desire to be like God? How does that look in a modern context? Well, for some, and I'll blame myself, we take credit for God's work. People will say, oh, what a wonderful thing you did. And you say, oh, thank you. It wasn't hard at all. Forgetting that it is God who has made all things and who has given us our own gardens of Eden, who has continually provided for us the air we breathe, the food we eat, and yet we take the credit for God's work as if it is something we have done ourselves. I also read in my favorite theologian, Walter Brueggemann, says that our arrogance creeps in when we forget, when we begin to get amnesia and we forget all of the things that God has done for us, and we think that we've done it on our own. We think that we're so good that we got the job on our own. They loved me so much, they gave me the house, and all of these things that God has made a way for us to have in our Eden experiences. And our, however unbeknownst, our desires to be like God, we take the credit from God. We exert our own authority. Oh, we'll do this or we'll do that. Next Thursday, we'll do this. We put our plans in place and we ask God to co-sign on our plans rather than asking for God to bless our plans or even to help us to develop our plans. God is a righteous judge, yet we, in our desire to be God, we judge people. We say who's in and who's out, who's acceptable, who can be loved, who's lovable, who's worthy and who's not. God, we say, is our provider, this wonderful large God, yet we gather and accumulate things. We put money in the bank. We look forward to our savings and our security as if God is unable to provide for us. Excuse me. God is all knowing and ever present, yet we seek to control and to predict outcomes. And so, the arrogant also make demands of God. We'll go back to the story of Job. Job complains to God and he challenges God and he says, I cry out to you, God, but you do not answer. I step up to you and you merely look at me. He kind of gets in God's face. And so my last question, how does God respond to human arrogance? And I believe God asks us in our moments of arrogance, that is a balance. We seek to not have the very nature that causes us to be arrogant. As Rabbi mentioned, we're constantly in tension, trying to keep ourselves humbled, but yet living in our space. And so God asks some simple questions. When we get uppity and haughty and highfalutin, he says, where were you when I laid the earth's foundations? Have you ever given orders to the morning? Or, you know this, where does darkness reside? Have you entered the storehouses of the snow or seen the storehouses of hail? These are responses found in the book of Job. What's the way to the place where lightning is dispersed? God asks us in our moments of haughtiness, can you heal? Can you tell me about tomorrow? So as I end, it is my view and my belief that the root causes of arrogance in the Genesis and in the Garden of Eden, in that pericope, begins when we begin to try to take on the role of God, when we desire to be God in a small way. It's very subtle. We may not even be aware of it. Many of us will say, oh, I've never tried to be like God. I love God, I'm humble. But even in our day-to-day operations and in our day-to-day interactions, we do assume the role of God. And it's something that we can't help because of our nature. It's a tension. We're always on the way to being better. And God asks us those questions, and those questions, the list goes on. Can you save? Can you create? Can you cause the sun to rise and the moon to set, and things like that? So God is the creator and sustainer of all things. God created in the beginning, and it was all good. Hopefully, as I end, we will be ever mindful in our own faith traditions to simply let God be God. Amen.
Thank you so much, Pastor Karen. It is lovely to be listening to both of you, because there's so many stories which are very familiar to us Muslims. And because of the time limitation, it will be difficult for me to bring all that to you from the Quran also. So I'll try to do the best I can, what I have. But yes, all those stories are there for us to learn from. So let me just share the screen with you, and I will ask if you are able to see my screen. I'm just going to enlarge it. Okay, I hope it is all visible.
Yes, it is.
Great.
Yes.
All right. So yes, the topic is the root causes of arrogance. So AMWA tries to bring topics which are happening all around us. And I thought that this would be the appropriate point to talk about arrogance, as what we have seen, unfortunately, in the last year and a half. So I am going to mention some aspects from an article, and I have put it in front of you. Little portions from that article will be in my talk. Now, as Muslims, we are advised that we should always start with anything in the day with A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, which means that there is a being with us, and he is the Satan. So that no matter what I do, I have to be very vigilant about Satan. Not that he's going to pick my hand and put a gun in it and I will shoot somebody. What he will do is whisper it in my ear or in my soul, so that I will do something wrong. So we are asked, be very aware that this being is there with you. So I start with, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. So yes, arrogance has been mentioned in the Quran. And as you see from here, it is at least 48 times mentioned in the Quran. So be very aware of it. It has been mentioned with Satan itself 4 times. And then for humanity, 44 times it has been mentioned to be very careful about arrogance. So what is really arrogance? Like my previous speakers have given their definitions also, and it is interesting. I have brought one definition which was just done by Pastor Karen. So arrogance is an unfortunate form of a mental self-defense. So is there a difference between confidence and arrogance? Yes. What is confidence? Confidence is a feeling that we have done for which we have worked hard. Doesn't mean, it can be, I could have a little pride about it, but arrogance is when we are trying to make ourselves feel better at the cost of belittling another person. Okay, so that's a difference between pride. Yes, I have worked very hard for where I am. I like that. But to think the other person is less than me, then I'm being arrogant. So it's a very fine line over there. Now, Mary, here it is what you had also taken the definition, having or showing the insulting attitude who believe that they are better, smarter, or more important than others. So that is what arrogance is. What are the root causes of this arrogance? It is not an inherited personality, thank God. Otherwise, we would always say, well, you know what? It is in my genetic system. That's it. What can I do about it? It is right in me. Instead, it is almost always an unconscious manifestation of low self-esteem. Okay? It can be a behavior which is osmotically learned from peers, or it can be a reaction which is embedded by the scars of events past. Either way, arrogance is an unfortunate form of mental self-defense. We can also look at it goes back to some very negative experiences in our lifetime. It is a constant fear and a constant sense of insecurity. There are misconceptions about the nature of self, life, or others, and it is a maladaptive strategy to protect the self. And it is a persona to hide all of the above in adulthood. So I need to, because many of you may not be very familiar with Quran, you might have read a passage here and there, and unfortunately after 9/11, Quran became the most popular book to be read, and what they read was certain aspects only and not the whole book and its meaning or understanding. So I need a little bit time for you to understand what is in the Quran. So in the Quran mentions there are three creations which God has. There are already two of them before Adam comes along. There are angels and there is Satan. Now in Arabic, the Satan, whose name is Iblis, is like Adam is for humanity. So Iblis is the biggest Satan. And Adam, as we know, is the first creation. Now, who is a Satan? Satan is in Arabic, he is a jinn. Now, jinns are created from fire, while angels are created from light, and Adam is created from black mud. And Satan, as other faith might think, in Quran, he's not a fallen angel. So that we do not accept he was ever an angel. He was always a jinn. He was created from fire. So this is what my talk will be about. Where do we start? As we have already previous speakers have said, we are starting from Garden of Eden. So here is the verse from the Quran, and it comes, and remember when your Lord said to the angels, verily, I'm about to create. That means there's a process has been going on, he has been thinking about it. I'm going to have another being over there. So there's a lot going on. And he tells to these angels who has been with him, I'm going to create a man from a raw clay of black mud. You know, many times people have asked, students have asked me about the color of the skin. And here when we look at it, Quran says, black mud molded in. So chances are Adam is black and Eve is white, okay? Because there are the two colors, black and white. So when I have completed, you remember I said he's making this is a process which is going in. So when I have completed him and I have breathed my own spirit into him, this is at that time, I want you to fall down and prostrating yourselves onto him being Adam. So what is God asking his angels is a very big thing. That's not an easy thing. Prostrate, I don't know how many of you do prostrate ever, but for Muslims, 5 times a day, we are prostrating, and we are prostrating to God. So this is what the command was given to the angels also. So the angels fall prostrate. All of them together, because this is a command coming from God. They are not going to deny it. They fall, except Iblis. Here he is. He refused to be with those who prostrated. Right then and there, he says, no, I'm not doing it. And God says to him, Iblis, what is your reason for not being with those who prostrated? So he says, I am not such that I prostrate myself onto a man whom you have created of rock, clay, black, mud, molded? You want me to prostrate to him? No, no way. This is out of the question. Iblis says, I am better than he. Thou created me from fire, and him thou created from the clay. Allah, over here, God says, O Iblis, what prevents thee from prostrating thyself to one whom I have created with my own hands? God is so proud of it, this creation he has done of a human being. He says, I have done it with my own hands. Now, when we say this is mine, or this is what I made, I'm telling others, listen, I'm very proud. I am really proud of what I have done. This is a really unique thing I have made. And then he says to him, so are you one of the haughty ones? You are the high one? You're telling me I'm not going to prostrate? Then he says, you get out of it. God is so upset about his defiance against his that you are going to be driven away from this heaven. You will be accursed. And this curse will be on until the day of judgment. So like the rabbi was saying, this will be a very interesting talk. This was always meant to be that we will be coming to the earth, we'll be here for a time, and then whatever will be done. So yes, it is from here, this was already thought of, till the day of judgment, he will be punished. So what does Iblis say? Instead of recognizing that he's being arrogant, he blames God. Oh Lord, because you have left me to stray. Certainly I will ordain which evil to them on the earth, and certainly I will cause them all. This is, he has told God, I am going to make all of them go astray, except for chosen servants among them. So God says, he is still speaking. He says, my Lord, because thou hast made my life evil to me, I will certainly make evil fair seeming to them on the earth, and I will certainly cause them all to deviate. All of them will be deviating. Now, if you remember when Adam, which we have already mentioned, Eve and Adam, what had happened, they were told to not go near that tree, because the tree of knowledge, it will tell them what is wrong and what is right. They had made an error also. They had not listened, because God had said, there's only one tree I don't want you to go to. You can go to all the others, don't go to this one. So he says, our Lord, we have wronged ourselves. They recognized their error. This fellow said, nothing doing, right? If you do not forgive us and do not have mercy on us, we shall surely be among the losers. He says, okay, fine. I accept your apology, but you know what? You're still going on the earth. That is the destination for a time for you. You shall live there, and there you shall die, and from it you shall be raised to life again. So this is the verse I am going to put in front of you. This verse really makes us think. And this verse says, O mankind. And if you could read Arabic, it says Annas, meaning everybody, all the humanity. We over here is the royal we. So God, when he speaks about himself in Quran, he talks it in the royal we, you know. We create not in plurality. So please, because people have asked me, are there two gods? Why is it we? So it is not plurality, it is royalty. We created you from a single pair of a male and a female, and made you into nations and tribes, so that you may know each other, not to despise each other. Verily, the most honored of you in the sight of God is he who is the most righteous of you. And God has full knowledge of whatever you do. Now, there is a hadith. Hadith is something with the Prophet, peace be upon him, has said, and it's not part of the Quran. And it is that if there is even a tiny bit of a seed of arrogance in you, it will be so difficult to reach into the heaven. And it gives you an example. He says, as if you are trying to put a camel through the eye of the needle. So humility is what is is religiously approved of, and to be arrogant, like the pastor said, and also the rabbi, you know, did we create this world? Do we make the sun come up? We have no, I don't even have power of this whole day as to what I will be doing it. So how can I be arrogant in this thing? So with that, I think I don't know how much time I have. I was not looking at my watch. I was looking at the slides. Do I have a few minutes or should I just stop over here?
You have time, Ajmi.
I have time. Okay. So what we feel is that people with the intellectual arrogance identify with their beliefs. Their cherished beliefs contribute to their sense of self-worth. Okay. So if they lose that, you know what they're losing? They're losing their identity and worthiness. And there is nothing more dreadful for them to lose their identity and worthiness. So they will react out. So what are the other symptoms of it? It is an exaggerated desire to receive compliments. They talk constantly about themselves. They don't recognize their errors or accept criticism. Forgiveness does not exist in their vocabulary. They are intolerant towards differences. They are overcompensating for their own weaknesses, and they have an intimidating attitude. So what do we say? Life is really conditional. Life is imperfect. All infants are born with a natural desire for love, care, and attention. Ideally, these are readily available and given unconditionally, but it is not. We know there's conditions are put to it. Life is imperfect, and young children experience some degree of harshness or deprivation in their upbringing. So our child can get stuck in needing to put me first. So the child's ability to receive love, care, attention has to be competed because it is conditional. And what is the problem? And that is my question to the parents who are in this program. Remember, there is what is called sibling rivalry, trying to get attention of the parents. And that sometimes can become a problem for that very child, where he's competing, he or she, for the parents' attention and approval. So these are the factors which we need to keep in our mind. And I will complete with that, which is, since winning is to raise one's worth, arrogant people tend to be extremely competitive, be it winning at work, relationship, or even in arguments. Arrogant people are more about winning than about friendship. They're constantly on the watch for opportunities to one up. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Majbeen, Rabbi Maya, and Dr. Minister K. We have one question so far. How do we practice the balance of ignorance among humanity to offer kindness and compassion to others? It's in the chat box.
Do you want us to just jump in?
Fine, yeah, just jump in, whoever wants to answer that question.
Well, I think Dr. Hassan set us up incredibly with ending with talking about sibling rivalry, because while I'm not convinced from a Jewish perspective that the roots of arrogance are in the Garden of Eden itself, I think when I look at the serpent, for example, which I was so grateful that Dr. Blacks brought up, and the arrogance of the way that he speaks, well, I don't actually, the way the serpent speaks to the first human beings, right? And encourages them, says, oh, come on, aren't you good enough to, eat of the tree and all of that? it's interesting that the serpent's not completely wrong in what the serpent says. The serpent says, you're not going to die. What's this whole thing with dying? And guess what? They don't die right away. They get a knowledge of their own mortality, which you could argue maybe is a form of dying, right? But they don't die right away, right? And some bad things end up happening. They get put out of utopia, and Eve is going to have pain in childbirth, and Adam's going to really have to work the land, and it's going to hurt him when he does. At the end of the day, I mean, we've had children, and I think a lot of us would say that there's no greater joy than having maybe gone through birthing children and all of that. So there is blessing that even came out of the curse. So I think that's, for me, some food for thought. But then with Dr. Hassan mentioning sibling rivalry, what happens after the garden? In Torah, in Old Testament, in Bible, Adam and Eve go out into the world and they have the children, right? They have children. And who do they have? Cain and Abel, the first sibling rivalry. And there, I think, and I hadn't thought of it until you mentioned it, Dr. Hassan, that's where the arrogance really comes in from a Torah perspective, right? That Abel and Cain both bring an offering to God, these two brothers, and God seemingly likes Abel's better. Depends on how you want to interpret it. And Cain can't deal with this. He can't deal with the fact that Abel seems in Cain's eyes to be the favorite. And what does that cause him to do? It causes him to kill his brother. And there we see the root of what human beings can do to each other when arrogance takes over. So just a little after the Garden of Eden, I think I'm seeing the root of human arrogance.
Dr. Hassan, did you want to answer that question also?
I think I will let Reverend Blacks take over before I say anything.
Okay, I'm looking for the question. How do we practice the balance of our arrogance and humility to offer kindness and compassion to others? I think it is a daily task that we have to be mindful of, and we have to kind of train ourselves away from self-satisfaction. And I'm sure all of our sacred texts say that we should love God first and then love our neighbor. And so if I am putting my neighbor before myself, I will consider my neighbor, and I will be mindful of how my actions and my words and how I am interpreted by my neighbor. And it's a daily, not struggle, but it is something that we have to be intentional about. I just say that my short answer is to put your neighbor above yourself.
Oh, great. Okay, so how I would bring this into perspective. So let me just give you about my own example. Why I'm bringing that? Because it makes a difference. So I'm a physician, I'm a surgeon, I'm a healer. When my work gets done rightly, I feel, not pride, but that I have done something. My patients sometimes elevate me high. Okay. This is that moment when I have to bring myself down. Why? Like you had mentioned, and the rabbi, it's not in my hands, the healing. I have learned, I have taken knowledge, but believe me, it's still not me who gets the wounds healed up or the body, taken care of. So I need to keep it always in mind that when things go wrong, it brings me down from the top to the bottom. You would not believe where I go. Okay. And that's the moment I realized I really do not have the power. Yes, I can pray for it. Yes, I can study it. Yes, I can put it in effect. But there is some out there, some being which has much more power, and the prayers do work. So when we say pray for somebody, we are always asking people to pray. Yeah, pray with humility, asking, I don't have it. I need it from you, whoever that being is.
So there's another comment that says, can all the speakers comment on a specific advice for each one of us to increase our humility and keep our ignorance in check?
I will start that one. It's really short. It's something that I I told myself years ago. I I once met a man who I once complained that I had no shoes until I met a man who had no feet. And so a good way to some advice on how to increase your humility is to go out and serve. Um, Go out and look at the world, count your blessings, see that none of them were really acquired on your own, understand how easy come, easy go, but really go out and serve others. You think when you go out to serve others that you're going to do them a favor. Oh, I'll go and work with the homeless, or oh, I'll go and help do whatever. I'll do a food kitchen. But in fact, you receive the blessing when you humble yourself and serve others. And then you get a glimpse of heaven as you begin to understand the wondrous and amazing way that God works through all of us. And once you begin to understand how vast and how amazing and how high and how far and how great God is, you will find your small space in humanity. And from there, you can only be humbled because you just see the grander scale of things.
Great. I am going to take the advantage because I have the mic also. Put a question to my other speakers. We find that arrogance is in all of us. If we are in high place in our faith, we are arrogant to other members in our faith. If we have, let's say, more wealth, we are arrogant to those who have less. So arrogance is there all around us. Yet we try not to look into it deeply where the humility should be. And is this a healthy thing or unhealthy? And what can we do about it?
I don't know that I have a specific answer for what you just asked, Dr. Hassan. Maybe an extension from what Pastor Blacks was just saying, and maybe it starts to point to what you're asking. But I think in addition to gratitude, fostering gratitude, which is what I think Pastor Blacks was just saying, I really appreciate that. Cultivating the ability to ask for forgiveness is perhaps one of the hardest things that we human beings can do. To actually approach another human being and to say, I wronged you, please forgive me, and then demonstrating with our actions that we have turned a different way. Us Jewish clergy are already starting to think about the High Holy Days because they're very early this year at the beginning of September. And on the holiday of Yom Kippur, our big day of repentance, Jews are supposed to repent every day, part of our liturgy. But on Yom Kippur in particular, we really humble ourselves and ask for forgiveness for all the terrible things that we've done, for being too arrogant, for all of those things. But there's this really powerful statement on Yom Kippur where it says, for sins between a human and God, right? Ways that we've wronged God. The Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement atones. So when we go to synagogue on Yom Kippur and we say we're sorry to God, God's going to forgive us. But it continues on, for sins of one human being against another, the Day of Atonement does not atone until one human has asked the other human for forgiveness and changes their ways. That's it. I love that my tradition says that God's going to forgive us. right? That the love and the compassion of God is there at all times, right? We have to find the humility in ourselves to say, I'm sorry to God. But it is epically harder to say you're sorry to another human being. And that's where the hard work happens. And you have to check your arrogance. You have to raise up your humility in order to look in the eye of your fellow human and say, I'm sorry. I can't think of any more powerful way to force us to do that. And it's the one thing we neglect to do the most, I think.
Dr. Varsi has her hand up if she would like to ask a question or a comment.
Please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much for excellent presentations and very thoughtful points. I just would like to add that yes, in Islam also, in the Quran also, this is what we are taught, that for any of the errors we can ask Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. But when it comes to human dealings and human relationship, if you have done any wrong to anybody, you have to ask you have to ask forgiveness from that person. So this is just really beautiful that we are all very similar. And I think I would just like to add there that we have to think about the fact that, as soon as we get arrogance in ourselves, that we have to get rid of it. Because what we are taught in Islam is that even a tiny little bit of arrogance can lead you to a lot of difficulties in the hereafter. So how do we get rid of this arrogance? This is one point. I think we have been discussing it, and I would like one of the speakers to add to it, to our knowledge, that when we do have arrogance, like I think all of you agree that we do all develop some arrogance or the other, how can we get rid of that arrogance?
We can start. Yeah, go ahead.
About forgiveness, asking for forgiveness and knowing we get it from God, and facing the person that we have offended, that's difficult. And I would also offer that we can practice our humility when we are wronged and we get the high chair that they have to come and ask us for forgiveness. We can humble ourselves and help that person in their own repentance by offering them kindness beyond what we may think they deserve. And our desire to be God, we may judge them and say, you were so awful to me, you are going to have to make this up to me. And I would submit that it is equally difficult to be kind, genuinely kind and open and inviting to someone who has wronged you harshly. Going back to Dr. Hassan's slides, we never know what a person has been through or how they live or what they've been taught or what's been done to them that manifests itself in an evil act that they may commit against us. And if we begin to really try to look at each other through the eyes of God and see each one as precious and deserving of as much tenderness as we can give them, and practice that. And it's hard to get started on that because it's easier to be upset with the person who cuts you off in traffic, or even the rude person in the supermarket, or the neighbor who's never spoken, but you continually take that person the newspaper, or you're always offering out food or something that it costs you something. We're all called, I believe, to a sacrificial love, and that sacrificial demonstration. We've got to give a little piece of ourselves so that until we're uncomfortable. Giving what's easy to give is easy to give. And I'm sure there's something in the Bible that I just can't find it right now. But when we sacrificially give, when we get really vulnerable, and I've stacked all this money and I want to love my neighbor, well, then why don't I give them the larger portion of what I have put away for myself and really step out on a limb and put myself in a vulnerable position to offer that humility. And it's like a muscle. the more you try it, I believe, not the easier it gets, but the more it glorifies God. And in turn, you can you walk a little softer, you live a little lighter. Things that used to offend you won't be so offensive. And I think that's a good start. And like I will always say, it is an ongoing, daily, intentional endeavor. We don't get it overnight. And in our faith traditions, we talk about the end, and maybe those things we ultimately are perfected in the ends. But in the meantime, on the way there, it is something that we have to work towards every day. You have something, give it away. Give it away.
I'm sorry, that it's just so powerful. And it's making me think of a story that we tell of two brothers who lived on either side of a hill. One brother had a wife and children and a lot of people he had to feed, and one brother lived alone. And they both were harvesting one harvest. And the one brother thought to himself, my brother across the hill lives alone. He doesn't have a wife and children to take care of him. I'm going to give him a little extra of my harvest because he needs it. And so in the middle of the night, he packed up some of his extra harvest and he went across the hill and left it for his brother. But that same night, the brother who lived alone was thinking to himself, my brother across the hill has a wife and children. He has so many people to feed. I'm going to take some of my harvest and I'm going to give it to my brother because he needs extra. And in the middle of the night, they were walking on other sides of the hill. They didn't see each other. When they woke up in the morning, they saw that nothing was missing. And they said, I thought I took something over last night. Where did all of this hay come from? And so they did the same thing the next night and the next night, until one night they were walking over the hill to go and provide for the other, when they met in the middle and they embraced one another because they realized what was happening. And Jewish tradition maintains that that is where the Holy Temple was built, that sacred place in Jerusalem, that is where God's footstool, God's throne on earth would be, because that is where those two brothers met in such humility and compassion. And so, Pastor, when you're speaking, I'm thinking of that story, and I'm just thinking of, we always have something to give, right? Whether it's material or in spirit. And when we all meet each other in that place of giving, that's where the most holy things happen.
Very good. Excellent. So, Rabbi, I wanted to mention it to you while you were talking about Yom Kippur and how you are two aspects. One is asking God for forgiveness, and one is human beings. So I know you have heard the word Hajj, which is the pilgrimage for us to go to to Mecca. For us, it is important, if we are going for Hajj, that first we ask people to forgive us. And that sometimes can be very difficult, to making even a phone call to how many people over the years, over your lifetime, and like you said, going to the house of God and asking his forgiveness is easy, but asking human beings to be forgiven is very difficult. But I have a question for both of you, and that is about prostration. When God asked Satan to prostrate, this was not easy, because when he says, I'm blaming you because you made me from fire. So there is a certain personality you have given me, and you're asking me to prostrate with this guy who's made out of mud. So this, you know me well. So I have been asked or mentioned about Muslims prostrating in their prayers. And some people, very nicely, I'm not talking in any way degrading it, they say, we can never do that. Prostration for me is out of the question. So what do you think about, because I know on Yom Kippur, some of the rabbis do prostrate. Is that a difficult thing for them? Is not, but for the rest of the congregants?
It's interesting because we do have those kind of rare moments where we really humble. I mean, that's what the physical prostration is. I think in Judaism, we do more bowing before God in order to kind of show that humility, and that choreography during our prayers is the way that not only we humble ourselves before God, but I think just humble ourselves in general. I've always really respected in Islam, the real demonstration of humility that I think Muslim practice has. But I'm interested from the Christian perspective, because I don't know, I've seen Catholics kneel, but I'm interested, Pastor.
I've not seen, and maybe it's my limited view, my limited exposure. I've not seen prostration in our faith tradition. What we follow along with the teachings of Jesus is the foot washing. And I would love to see more of that, how we honor each other by lowering ourselves, humbling ourselves, and washing the feet of the people. And it's usually the clergy who wash the feet of the people, the church leaders, and the leadership humbles themselves to wash the feet of the people. I don't see enough of it. I think it is a good practice. It is a two-way teaching. It teaches the person doing the washing to humble themselves, but it is also a wonderful physical and public display for people of faith to see, so that we can be transformed into genuine, transparent places of faith, houses of worship that are not just coming in for programming and to check things off of our list, but to try to have an authentic relationship with each other. I love those two brothers, how they meet. If God is in you and God is in me, imagine what transpires when we meet each other in that space. And so that's I don't know about prostration, but the foot washing for me.
Yeah, you have reminded me. I have seen it, even when the Pope also bends down and washes the feet. It is really something to observe. So we have another hand raised. Fokia, would you please open your mic and ask your question?
It's not really a question, really. I wanted to ask whether or not it's relevant. It's something about veiling yourself, which many Muslims do. It does not mean to hide yourself. It also means not to exhibit your wealth in front of the poor, or your food. We went to such and such restaurants in front of the hungry. Marriage that is in front of the unmarried, that is also veiling. House in front of a traveler of parents, or traveler or parents, if you have, in front of the orphan. Veiling is also to keep someone's secret. Don't reveal their weaknesses in front of others, and not to interfere in other people's situations. So, arrogance, I was thinking about, could also be in many ways, in these ways as well. Thank you.
Thank you. That was your comment on that aspect. So thank you. Yeah, veiling is that we already mentioned. So we have about 3 more hands raised. So if you could keep your questions as...
Najreen, we have 1 minute left before the time is
wow.
up.
Okay.
I see the hands up. I appreciate the questions. If you can send an email to AMWA, and we'll try to get your answers from our speakers. I just want to conclude by saying thank you to Rabbi Young, Dr. K, Reverend K, Dr. Martin, for your presentation. And for everyone that registered, please, you will be getting an email for your to do a survey please do fill in the survey to help us get some feedback for the program and for the future programs. And I hope everyone has a good day. Thank you everyone for attending.
It was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank